Hi everyone, my name is Leah Rogstead and I teach Spanish at a school in Los Angeles. We have been doing distance learning for I think 7 weeks right now, and I just wanted to share one of the tools that's been most useful for me in my language classroom and share some strategies that I think might be helpful for a CI classroom or a comprehensible input classroom. So the goals are to make sure that you all understand how to access Pear Deck and create presentations with it, and then also look at some different prompts and strategies that you can use with Pear Deck to maximize engagement and hold students accountable for their learning. These are some of the benefits that I've seen with Pear Deck over my time using it. First of all, I think that it is a great way to be able to see what students are thinking in real time, because you can actually see what they're typing in as you ask a prompt. It's a great way to generate conversation, a little bit of debate in class. I've used it a lot for formative assessment, whether that's just a comprehension check or a quick quiz at the end of class. And then last but not least, I love that I have a record of every student's responses after class. So this makes grading easy, and it's also makes communicating with parents easy because you have data from every single student for each class. So to start off with, how to use Pear Deck, number 1. It's pretty easy to download Pear Deck. You're just going to open Google Slides, go to Add-ons, the tab at the top, click Get Add-ons. You can search for Pear Deck in the little add-on store, and then you're just going to download it. Once you have Pear Deck, you're going to open up your Google Slides presentation, whether it's already made or you're making it, and then again, go to add-ons. You'll see Pear Deck for Google Slides add-on and click Open the add-on. When you do that, you'll get a little toolbox at the right side of your Google Slides screen with a bunch of different options for questions that you may want to ask students. So just to give you an idea of questions that you could ask, these are the buttons that you'll be able to see: text, multiple choice, a number, a website, drawing, or draggable, which actually allows the students to draw or drag icons to different parts of the screen. So for example, I might have a question on the slide that has a bunch of, these are Instagram posts about what you could do during quarantine, and their warm-up was to try and figure out what one of them said. So I just clicked on that text icon, and what happens is a little gray box will go to the bottom of the slide, and this will, when students are looking at it through their kind of student login, they'll actually have a text box that they can respond to, and then you'll be able to see that response. So again, you could use text, multiple choice, or any of these other options. What's nice is that you have those basic options, but Pear Deck is already designed to make your life a lot easier. So they have beginning of lesson questions, during lesson, and end of lesson. So you have like your bell ringers, your comprehension checks, and then exit slips. And then also specifically, they have questions already made for different disciplines. So if you go to world language, there are some really cool slides already made, so you don't have to like come up with the prompt. They already have it there for you. So when you have designed your lesson and you are ready to present it to your students, what you're going to do is go to your Google Slides with your Pear Deck open and hit Start Lesson. Once you hit Start Lesson, a little box will come up and it will say student-paced activity or instructor-paced activity. If you are doing asynchronous classes, you can choose student-paced, and then you'll send that lesson to your students and they can complete it at their own pace. But for synchronous classes or live classes, that's what I'm doing, I choose instructor-paced activity. Once I do that, a code will come up. I give that code to my students or present it on my screen in Google Meets, and then my students will go to joinpd.com, put the code in, and then they are in the lesson. When they're in the lesson, they're basically looking at a PowerPoint screen, and then when the prompts come up, they will have a chance to fill those out. So, for example, this was another warm-up, los memes del día, or the memes of the day. So they had to look at a meme and then figure out what it meant. So on the right side of my screen right now, you can see in real time what I could see. I can see the anonymous responses of students, which allows me to check, are they really understanding? And also kind of figure out which ones they're getting, which ones they need more help with. Some other cool features that you can use once you've actually started your lesson in a live class is if you go to the lock or unlock screens icon at the bottom of the screen, you can set a timer, which I find really helpful because it helps students know how much time they need before I'm going to be calling on them or checking in. And then also, if you feel like you need to check in with your students again and you're not sure if they're getting it, there's actually a new prompt icon, which will allow you to insert a question in real time. So you can ask another question to make sure that they're understanding or to get more feedback. So after class, this is the data part. You can also do this during class, but I normally do it after. You can sign in to peardeck.com with your login, and you can actually go to every single session that you've done with students. And for every session, you can go through your slides and see exactly what each student responded. This is great because it allows you to track individual students responding, and I use this for participation grades or also formative assessment. All right, so this is, once now you know kind of how to use Pear Deck, these are some of the prompts that I've been using in my classroom that I've found interesting to spark engagement and to also hold students accountable for their learning. So just as kind of a category, or the different categories that I've had are warm-ups, conversation starters, comprehension checks, and then links to other sites or Google Forms for independent work. All right, we've already looked at types of questions. So here are some examples of warm-ups or daily questions that I've used. So we looked at this before. Again, this is like a normal warm-up as kids are getting in and I'm kind of taking attendance. They'll look at los memes del día. They'll choose one of them and then have to tell me in English what it means. So again, on their screen, they're going to see a text box. This is the screen that I see from my end. So again, this is a text response. Another one that I use is just a classroom gauge at the beginning of the day. ¿Cómo estás hoy? They could actually choose an option on this one. So I inputted all of the emotions and then they can choose which one they feel. This is fun for comparing, like, oh, todos están cansados hoy, or oh, están muy felices, ¿por qué están felices? So it starts conversation, and also if they're all having a terrible day, then I can adjust my lesson accordingly. This is another just text response, again, looking at reading something. So I gave them a little forecast of the weather in Los Angeles this week, and they had to tell me in Spanish what the weather was going to be like on Wednesday. So a little bit of interpretive reading and then production. Let's see, what other daily questions have I used? Oh, so the calendar we normally do once a week just to check in with events that are happening in our virtual school right now. So students can either respond with a text response telling me what they're planning on doing, or if there is another activity that I haven't put on the list yet, they can go ahead and respond with the text. And I find this is a lot more effective than when I try and cold call on people or just say, oh, does anyone have an activity? They're much more likely to type it in than just yell it out. So that's been helpful for getting engagement. And then this is one I tried out this week that I've really loved. So at the beginning of class, I will give them a little story or a description. This was the weird news of the week. So they read the news and then they actually have to draw a representation of what it was about. It's fun to look at the drawings together. And again, it's another way to check comprehension. And just as a little tip, I'll play music during that just to make it kind of a relaxing beginning to class. All right, conversation starters. So there's a bunch of different ones you could do with this, and I could see this being used a lot in upper levels. But for example, on this one, you can actually drag the icon. So pineapple is an acceptable pizza topping, agree or disagree. They can drag it to wherever they feel, and then we can kind of use that as a starting off point for a debate. For TPRS stories or one-word images, I've been using Pear Deck to get ideas for this story. So for this one, this was the beginning of a story. Hay un chico, ¿cómo se llama? And then in Pear Deck, they can write what they want the kid's name to be, and I'll choose one of them from there. So that's been great for contributions and getting students to be creative with story creation. Another conversation starter or kind of just processing input. This one says, ¿Lo harías? Would you do it? So they can drag the icons with the red star being like, I would never do that, nunca lo haría. Yellow, like, okay, maybe I do it. And then green, like, oh, sí, lo haría. So again, this helps us be able to see where students are, start debate, and also show that they are processing the input. This is another one of my daily questions, but I love to play like 2 truths and a lie, or just read one of the responses that students write in, and then the other students will type in the chat trying to figure out who it is. So it's another way to recycle that input and just create more chances to be listening to the language. So again, this one says, ¿Qué hiciste este fin de semana? Which is, what did you do this weekend? They write 5 sentences in, and then we will either share them out or play a game with them. And then we have analysis and a conversation starter. So say you had a piece of art, you can actually use the drawing tool to have students kind of annotate the picture or point out things that they like. So that's another way you could start a conversation. And then last but not least, this is perhaps the most useful form, is comprehension checks and formative assessment. So for example, we're reading a book called Las Noches Misteriosas en Granada por Christy Placido. Really good book. I would recommend it. So in this case, they had to put what happened in the story in chronological order by either drawing the letter or just drawing lines. So another comprehension check. With this one, this is just a quick formative assessment. I put in different names in the multiple choice. So they had to tell me who painted the mural after maybe I had given them a little input lecture about the mural. And then last but not least, this has been really useful because I actually really don't like how Google Forms are designed. I think they're kind of messy. So I will just do a quick quiz like cierto, falso, or either or translate this to English with just putting a writing response Pear Deck prompt at the bottom, and then I will say número uno, el gato come pizza. Número dos, blah, 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 blah. And the students can just type their answers into Pear Deck. I can see that they're doing it real time, so I know they're not copying and pasting their answers. And it's also super fast to just go into peardeck.com after class to grade their responses. So those have been really helpful for those quick quizzes and formative assessments. And then last but not least, just another way that you could assess is using the prompts that Pear Deck has already made. This is an example one. Write one way that you may be able to use Pear Deck in your class, or write one thing you learned, one thing you're confused about. So again, an exit slip. Just some issues to keep in mind. Sometimes the videos that I'm presenting on my screen don't show on my student screen. There is this add-on called Pear Deck Power Up, which I think will allow the videos to play on their screen. Another thing is don't have too many tabs open because sometimes presentations can get glitchy if there's so many things open on your computer. And then last but not least, Pear Deck is free right now, which is great for us in this kind of emergency learning situation. But I'm doubting it will be free in the future, and I think it's over $100 a year. So it's something to think about if you think you're going to be in distance learning for longer than just this spring. All right, so conclusion, Pear Deck has been a game changer for me in terms of checking student comprehension and holding students accountable. At my school, I'm teaching mostly middle schoolers, and they're allowed to have their cameras off, which means that the only way for me to really check in is to have those constant comprehension checks. So that's been great for live classrooms. And it's also made class more interesting because I can kind of personalize what we're talking about based on what students put into Pear Deck. So I hope you find a way to help make distance learning more enjoyable for you. And by no means am I an expert on Pear Deck. I've just been experimenting with it for the past few weeks. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And please share the other ways you're using it, because I know there's a lot more ways that we could be using it in our classroom to engage our students and to check for comprehension. Gracias.